Okay, good morning everybody. Thank you very, very much indeed for coming. My name's Simon. I'm going to be here for the next half an hour or so. The presentation, Panic Like a Pro. My job is to train people in how to make presentations, particularly how to make business presentations. And before we go any further, I kind of want to warn you about something, which is fundamentally that in the same way as a great tennis coach, in the same way as a great tennis coach doesn't have to be able to be a great tennis player, I could actually be a rubbish presenter and still be a good coach. Now that is my excuse for screwing up this morning's presentations. Panic Like a Pro. It's called that because an awful lot of people, an awful lot of research suggests that one of the things that scares people most in this world is actually public speaking, standing in front of people, doing exactly what I'm doing now. So could I just have a quick show of hands before we go any further? How many of you get to the point where you think, it'd be really good to stand up and talk to people, it would be really good to go to a networking meeting, it would be really good to give a lecture, and then you have an attack of common sense and think, oh my God, no. Who's... Okay, and the rest of you are just here because it's too cold downstairs. Okay. I'm going to go through some techniques with you for the next half an hour or so, and these techniques are designed to help you deal with the terror that you get when you stand at the front of a room. But before we go into that, I do want to give you a reassurance. Fear is normal. Fear is absolutely normal, and the presenter who stands up and is not scared, the person who stands up and is not nervous, is either, and I'm going to make a gross generalization here, a gross generalization, is either lying to you or boring, or possibly both. Now I know that there are exceptions to that rule, there are loads of exceptions to every rule, but by and large, adrenaline is what makes people interesting, it's what makes them want to talk to you in the first place. So don't be frightened, don't think you're weird if you are frightened when you have to do this kind of thing. There's 4 of us in my company, we stand up and we are terrified. We have a mantra in the company. The day you stand up to make a presentation and you are not nervous is the day after you should have quit. Okay? So bear that in mind as we go through things. Let's have a look at a little bit of research. It is weird research. Okay? Can I just check, how many Americans in the room do I have? Excellent, so I could be rude about Americans without offending anybody. Is that? Just reassure me this video is not going as far as YouTube in America. It's stopping in... Okay. Weird research because you don't really want to ask Americans what they think about anything. You don't necessarily want to ask Sunday Times readers what they think about anything because they're not, frankly, representative of Joe Public. And Americans who read the Sunday Times, that's a really weird demographic. But all the research that follows up from this tells the same story. When you start talking to people about what is it you're most frightened of, first or second comes public speaking. There's a friend of mine, a guy called Andy, has a book called And Death Came Third, because when you do the research, you discover that the thing that frightens people third most is dying. Yeah, there's something very weird about the research that says I'd rather be in the coffin than talking at the funeral. So let's try that, let's see what happens. When you try this research, you apply it, and you get an awful lot of symptoms. Does anyone recognise any of those symptoms? Okay, who gets the sweats, the shivers, the flushes, and all of that kind of stuff? Just give me a quick, okay. How many of you get a dry mouth? Your mouth goes like the Sahara Desert. How many of you get a wet mouth and you just get flooded with saliva? Nobody? That's a real shame, because the wet mouth stuff, that's the easiest stuff in the world to cure. Swallow. It's your saliva, it's not going to kill you. The dry mouthers. Now I can give the dry mouthers a tip here before we go any further. This will not work here, and it will not work now, because you don't have a dry mouth. And don't try it now, because what's going to happen is you're all going to sit there and think, oh, we won't notice, I'll just try this. And I'm standing at the front, I can see when you try this. But here's the trick. If you have a dry mouth, I would like you very, very gently, and I do mean very gently indeed, to squeeze your cheek between the molars, the teeth that are called the molars, at the back of your mouth, very gently. Which bit of don't try this, it won't work, were you not listening to? Because there's 6 of you all going... And you have to be gentle about it, because the worst thing in the world is going, "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Simon Raybould." You have to be really, really gentle about it. But it will flood your mouth with saliva. Who does the mumbling, stuttering, rushing stuff? And you start to talk like this, and you're getting 5,000 words a minute, and you're thinking, "Oh my God, and you can give an entire presentation in about 35 seconds. Anybody? Yeah, me too. Okay. I don't have time today to show you how to deal with that one. The best way of dealing with that, to be honest, is to get your breathing sorted out. Yes, everybody breathes, I know. Okay. There are two ways of breathing, and I don't mean in and out. There's two ways of breathing. One is to use your intercostal muscles up here, and one is to use your diaphragm muscles down here. If you use your diaphragm muscles, you will slow down. You will also be able to get projected to the back of the room without a microphone, and you will sound an awful lot more confident. Let me give you an example. If I change the way I'm breathing, this is my normal voice now, A, B, C, D, E, and if I change the way I'm breathing so that all I'm doing now, all I've done is just change where I'm breathing. So now I'm breathing with my intercostal muscles, just the muscles at the top of my chest. Can you hear a difference in the way my voice sounds? I don't know how good the PA is. I don't know if it's coming across. Can you hear a difference in the way my voice sounds? There's no point just nodding, because I can't tell. Show of hands. Yes, you can. Okay, great. Okay. So the problem with this, of course, is that now I've started to do it, I'll be damned if I can get my voice back to where it's supposed to be. That's it. Okay. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that today, because I don't have time to do the breathing thing. If you want that, you have to pay money. Who does the talking backwards thing? I don't mean words reverse order putting in Yoda-like, okay? What I mean by talking backwards here is you start to speak, and then you lean backwards away from the words and away from your audience because you're frightened of them. Anybody? That's interesting. That is the only thing that every single one of you in the room will do. You cannot not. It is a reflex action. As soon as you are scared, you make yourself taller and you go, "But listen to what happens to my voice." Okay, you can't present with credibility when you're tipped back and talking backwards. Who goes to the toilet a lot when you're nervous? Yeah, just go. Okay. Obviously in the right places. And who actually gets the point of going, "Please, dear Lord, let the world open up in front of me and swallow me whole"? Who's in that camp there? Okay, let's see what I can do for you guys then. Okay, let me just give you some stats then. These are the current research bit on the world's greatest fears. Snakes come out top. Over half the population claims that they are absolutely terrified of snakes. If that includes anybody in the room, be advised now that in 3 or 4 slides' time, I am going to show you a picture of a snake. Okay? So third comes in with heights. Is that anybody? Scared of heights? Okay. Second comes in karaoke. Public speaking. Okay, so that's about 40–41% of the population say it's one of their greatest fears, and then over half the population says that they are frightened of snakes. Okay, so 51% of the population say they are frightened of snakes. And if those of you who are standing there thinking you are, or sitting there thinking you are frightened of snakes, how do you think I feel? Because this thing is right over my shoulder. So what I'm going to do now is talk to you a little bit about how you can solve the problems that are caused by this hormone. Anybody recognise this? Oh, come on. You mean you don't recognise it? No chemists in the room?
It'll be adrenaline.
It is adrenaline, yes, thank you, it's adrenaline. Okay, so we're going to fight our way through with adrenaline. I'm going to give you some really quick tips right up at the start here. Okay. The rooting stuff. This is all about getting your breathing down here. Just before we go any further, do me a favour. Just put your left hand on your belly. And your right hand on your chest, and just sit-ish straight. Okay. And obviously carry on breathing. Okay. Just carry on breathing as normal. And if you're feeling brave, just close your eyes so that you can be a little bit more aware of what your hands are doing, and just see if you can feel either or both of your hands being moved. It's not that your hands themselves move, it is that as you breathe in, your hands are moved by the expansion and contraction of either your chest or your belly. Okay, come back to me before you all fall asleep. Who's got right hand movement? Cool, you're all chest breathers. Who's got left hand movement? Okay, you're diaphragm breathers. Who's got both? And who's got movement in neither? There is a jargon word for people who have movement in neither. They are known technically in the jargon as dead. Okay? So you've got to have movement in one or the other. Now, what you would need to do to deal with the speed of which you speak, or the big nerves control thing that I can recommend for you, is practice breathing so that your breathing is down here in your belly. This hand, diaphragm movement hand. This is what we're looking for. Now this is the one where I'm sure you'll have gone online at some point and looked at presentation tips, and they will have said to you, take a deep breath. Anybody read that kind of thing? Okay. And what they mean is, take a low breath. Because if you just take a deep breath, and you're breathing up here, you're just making the situation worse. You're taking a big, wrong breath. So what we're looking for is a deep, low breath. And one of the best ways of doing this is to just put your hand on your belly there and just breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, hold it for 4, breathe in for 4. You get the idea. Okay? And when you've done that, you've got to the point of being able to just chant like that in your head. As you breathe out, just go in 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and just chant your way out. But don't go 1, 2, 3, 4. It's got to be 1, 2, 3, 4 in a long, smooth movement, all in one breath. Okay? As I say, I don't have time to do that properly. That's the stuff you have to pay for. Let me talk to you about something that will work spectacularly well. Anybody come across or heard of the work of a guy called Pavlov? This guy, okay? You've all heard the story of Pavlov's dogs. Anybody not familiar with Pavlov's dogs? Okay? For those of you who have managed to avoid David Attenborough's programs on BBC Two for the past 10 years, then, Pavlov was a research scientist. He was experimenting in dog saliva. He wanted to collect dog saliva, so he put holes in the cheeks of the dogs and he drained off the saliva. Okay? I never said he was a nice man, but he's a scientist. And what happened was that he discovered he could only collect saliva twice a day when he fed the dogs, once in the morning and once at night. So what he did then was he got into the habit of ringing a bell every time he fed the dogs. And the dogs got into the habit of going, bell, food, and they salivated at that point. Okay? And pretty soon he got to the point of not having to feed them to get them to salivate. He could just ring a bell, and the dogs would associate the bell and they would salivate. Okay? You've come across that story. Okay? Now, saliva is just a hormone. It's just like any other hormone. The only difference between saliva and most of the hormones that you produce is that most of the hormones you produce and you secrete into your bloodstream or something along those lines. Saliva is a hormone that you secrete out of your body into your mouth. But other than that, it's just your bog standard hormone. So anchoring is a technique whereby what you do is, instead of secreting the feel-fear hormones, the adrenaline and all of that kind of stuff, you secrete the feel-good hormones. Wouldn't it be a great idea if we could train ourselves, rather like Pavlov's dogs when they ring a bell to produce a hormone? Wouldn't it be a great idea if we could do something where you rang a bell and you produced the feel-good hormones? The hormones that you produce after exercise or after eating chocolate. If you feel like it, you can combine the two, but it kind of spoils the point of the exercise. All right? So these are the feel-good hormones, the euphoric hormones, the serotonins and all of that kind of jazz. Well, anchoring is just that. When you anchor, when you develop an anchored technique, what it does is allow you to create the feel-good hormones whenever you are scared. And here's how you do it. Every time, and I do mean every time, you are feeling nervous or anxious or whatever, forget about it. But every time you are feeling chilled out, happy, relaxed, and confident, I want you to do something. Do something. And the rules for this something that you do are that it has to be something that you don't already do. All right? So it's not a question of, oh, when I'm nervous I scratch my nose. That's not what I mean. Okay? It is something you don't already do. And it wants to be something which is discreet and subtle, so you can do it in front of your audience. And it very much, very definitely wants to be something that you do, not something that you have. So it's not wearing your lucky tie or your favourite socks. Because as sure as little green apples, at some point you will have to stand up and make a presentation and you won't be wearing your lucky tie or your favourite little socks or whatever it happens to be. Okay. Now I said at the beginning of the session that everybody in my company gets nervous when they stand up to make a presentation. I'm no exception. I've been working downstairs on the stand and I'm nervous. Everybody is nervous. So to help me deal with these nerves, I used my anchor. Anybody spot my anchor at the beginning? I'll be disappointed if you did, because if you did, it means it's not a very subtle anchor. But what I do when I'm nervous is I rub my thumb across the inside of my wedding ring. Now, before you say it, yes, I know that breaks one of my rules, because I've got to be wearing my wedding ring in order to do that, okay? I'm aware of that. Truth to tell, the day I stand up to make a presentation and I'm not wearing my wedding ring, I've got more things to frighten me than just doing that. Okay? At some point I will have to explain to my wife why I took off my wedding ring and lost it. I love my wife, but she does scare the devil out of me. Can we edit that bit out before she... So every time, what happened for me is every time I walked home, and I got to the point of just... I'm sure you know what I mean by the ah moment. Do you know what I mean by that? You walk around the corner and you see your house and you can go, ah. Anybody do that? Or when you're on the train up from London and you see the Angel of the North or the Tyne Bridge and you think, this is me, this is home. Anybody got that kind of sensation? Okay, so I was having a really rubbish time at work, but I walked around the corner, I saw my home and I went, ah. Because to be honest, once I get home, nothing is going to hurt me. It's a canny old house with doors yay thick. And even if you kick down the doors to hurt me, you have to get past my wife. And if you get past her, I have 2 feral teenage children. Nobody is going past them, so I'm safe. All I have to do is get home. So this was something I rubbed every time I went round the corner, every day for 3 weeks. Is that making sense? And every time I got this moment, I rubbed the inside of my wedding ring. Sounds too good to be true, but I promise you, it works. So what happens now is that every time I am nervous, I just do this. Okay. Out of interest, do you know who the best paid public speaker in the world is at the moment? You've done this before, it's Bill Clinton, thank you. Second best paid public speaker in the world is? Tony Blair. And I wish it was me. If you have nothing better to do with your lives tonight, go home, look at YouTube, and watch the 2 of them perform, and you'll notice that just before they start to speak, they squeeze together the thumb and middle finger of this hand. That is their anchor. Okay? You have to design your own anchor. This works for Tony Blair, this works for Bill Clinton. Politics aside, these guys are getting paid millions of dollars to do what they do. Okay? So you have to design your own. This is me. I'm doing this gig for free. This is Bill Clinton, who's on £1 million a day. You choose which of those 2 approaches you want to take. The thing is that you have to find your own. You have to find something that is yours, that is unique to you. I have one member of staff who scratches the palm of her hand when she is nervous. The audience don't notice, but it's really funny from my point of view, because I can see her standing there going... And I have another member of staff who curls up the toes of his feet. You know, makes a fist of his toes? Which is great, because you can hear the leather of his shoes squeaking as he does it. But nobody in the audience knows what they're doing. That's just something I can hear from the stage. Okay? So it's not going to work tomorrow, but if you do it every day for however long it takes to establish this habit, I promise it will work. Okay? A technique which I'm going to give you now, which will work tomorrow, is called using your peripheral vision. Okay, peripheral vision is just the stuff you see out of the corner of your eye. It's the stuff that makes you aware of when somebody's walking up towards you. They don't blindside you. Okay? How many of you, hand on heart, how many of you have taken a photograph of, I don't know, let's pretend, let's say, your kids on a beach or something, and you've got the photograph back and you've had it printed or you've had it on your laptop or whatever, and you've looked at it and the kids have been yay big, but you have a fantastic panoramic view of the entire beach. Anybody ever done that? I'm not the only person in the room that's done that. Okay. Now what happens there is, your mind filters out the beach. Okay? Your eyes still see everything, the camera still sees everything, but your mind filters out the beach, and all your mind cares about is the stuff that you were interested in, the kids. Is that making sense? Okay. So what is it I'm frightened of when I stand up here to make a presentation? What is it in the room that scares me? It's not a trick question. It's you guys. Okay, there's 100 and something of you in the room. You are the people that I'm frightened of. You are the reason that I get nervous. You are whatever it is that is making me scared. So what happens is, I get kicked off with a hormone called cortisol. And cortisol freaks down what I'm concentrating on. So that the idea is, my brain can take in more and more and more information about fewer and fewer and fewer things. That is, you guys. So I can tell everything there is to know about you guys, but I don't notice anything else in the room. Which means that everything I'm aware of is scary. Does that make sense? So what I want you to do is use your peripheral vision. So as I stand here, I'm looking at you. You are scary. Sorry, that comes across wrong, but you know what I mean. Okay? You are the scary thing in the room. And yet, out of the corner of my eye, I am aware of the laptop, that's not scary. The empty chairs in the front row, they're not scary. The door out, that's not scary. The carpet, that's not scary. The lights, that's not scary. The data projector, that's not scary. The microphone stand, that's not scary. I'm not looking at these things. I am just aware of them out of the corner of my eye. Is that making sense? Let's try it. This is where it's going to get really entertaining. What I would like you to do is just making sure that you're not going to clobber the person next to you. What I would like you to do for me is just stand up for a moment, please. I'm going to give you an exercise. Okay? Be very careful you don't clobber the person next to you in the face. So you might want to just scatter yourselves a little bit. What I'd like you to do is just turn your bodies so you are facing me. Not your faces, your entire... That's it, cool. And just notice what you can see behind me. So you guys in the middle, you're going to see this gap between the screen and Sage's expensive bandstand, yeah? And you guys over here, you're going to see me and that table. And you guys over here, you're going to see me and the sound control desk. Is that about right? That's in the background. So what I'd like you to do now is this. I want you to put your hands together in front of your face as though you were, you know, a 5-year-old child doing the traditional Christian prayer of God bless Mummy, God bless Dad. Okay. I would like you now to cup your hands so you can get a pretend squash ball in the gap between them. Squash ball. Hey, I'm not playing squash with some of you guys. Squash balls are small. Okay, so I would like you now to focus on that pretend squash ball. Keep your eyes focused on that pretend squash ball. Don't look at me. Look at the pretend squash ball. Keep your eyes focused on that pretend squash ball. And without moving your eyes, swing your hands out slowly in a horizontal arc until they disappear out of the edge of your peripheral vision. Be careful not to hit each other in the face, but you probably get to about here-ish. Okay, just wiggle your fingers just to draw your attention to it. Okay, now keep your hands where they are, but look now, now you can move your eyes, look how wide your peripheral vision actually is. It's not quite 180 degrees, but it's pretty close. Okay. Now look at me and become aware of everything that's in your peripheral vision now. So I'm looking right at the back of the room, but I'm aware of everybody who's in front of me. So you guys in the middle there, you're now looking at me, but your chances are you are now aware of an awful lot of the other members of the audience. Is that right? You guys particularly at the back, okay, put your hands down now, thank you. In fact, you can sit down now, to be honest. You guys at the back, I'm guessing you're looking at me, but chances are you could see everybody in the audience. Is that right? Yeah. Okay, he's nodding. Take my word for it. Okay. Is that making sense? So what this peripheral vision technique does is mean that you become aware of a whole bunch of other things which are not scary. So instead of my entire world being you guys, which is scary, I've now got a whole bunch of stuff. One of them is scary, but all the other stuff isn't. So I'm now, instead of going, oh my gosh, here is an audience in this room, I go, here is a room that happens to have an audience in it. It also happens to have a dozen other things as well. Okay, is that making sense? The downside of this, of course, is that you want to stand up at the front of your presentation and you want to go before you start to speak. it will solve the problem of ever being asked back to make a second presentation. Now, you don't have to do this. That's just an exercise to draw your attention to how wide your peripheral vision is. You can turn it on just like that. So the next time you have to stand up and make a presentation or anything along those lines, just stand here, do your anchor, get your breathing sorted, turn your peripheral vision wide, and it won't stop you being nervous. I wouldn't want to stop you being nervous, but it will help you control those nerves. Okay, is that making sense so far? Excellent. Okay. Next technique I want to give you. Next technique I want to give you is called visualization. It's a pretty straightforward technique, and it's built upon the idea that your brains, and I mean this in the nicest possible sense, your brains are actually pretty easy to fool. Crudely speaking, there's three bits. There's a reptile bit which sits at the back, and that controls things like sweating and breathing. There's the middle bit, which controls emotional stuff, and there's the smart bit at the front that does the thinking. Now, the middle bit is pretty easy to fool, really. How many of you have ever gone to a horror film? And how many of you have been scared at said horror film? Even though you know it's not real, right? Okay, that's because your mid part of your brain is pretty easy to fool. It sees things and it responds emotionally as though they were real. That's why you go to a horror film, or it's why you go to an action film, and all that kind of stuff, because you want to get emotionally involved with the presentation, the film, at that point being the presentation. So visualization is just a scientific way of saying, use your imagination to deal with that. So I'm standing here, I'm nervous, and it's not, you know, I don't pretend you're all sitting there in your underwear. That's stupid, it never worked, and goodness only knows why anybody ever pretended that it did. No presentation trainer in their right mind would ever say something like that. But what you can do is remind yourself of a very specific time and place where you were laughing. Cast your minds back now to a very specific time and place. Not just generally, oh, I had a good time at that party or on holiday or whatever. I mean a really specific moment. Think very carefully. Remember that moment. Remember what you could hear. Remember the background. Remember what you could see. Other people's faces, perhaps. Remember what you could see in the background. Trees, a bar, a beach, I don't know, I wasn't there. Remember what you could smell. And remember what you can feel. Now that's not going to work like that. None of these tricks except the peripheral vision trick ever work like that. But I promise you, if you practice, what happens is you can put yourself in that state of mind whereby you were chilled out. Is that making sense? It sounds too good to be true. But what happens is your forebrain, the smart part of your brain, sends information to your midbrain, the emotional part of your brain, the bit that deals with emotions and scaredness and how you're feeling and so on, and it says, you don't need to be scared, you are in this chilled out place. And the reason I say is that you have to have a specific thing to think about, not just a vague happy memory, a specific time, is because it is much, much easier and much, much more effective to do this with a memory than with your imagination. Is that making sense? So you have to think of something very, very specific to remember, and the order in which you generally are recommended to remember it is sound, sight, smell, touch. Okay, I don't really have time now to go into the full details of why and all of that kind of jazz, but I can talk about that later on if anybody's interested. Okay. Those are the big techniques. Let me give you two now, in closing, very simple techniques. The simplest technique of all, before you stand up to make a presentation, is have what we call a ties and flies list. Ties and flies. How many of you have ever gone up to make a presentation and you're standing there and you're a little bit worried about the technology, or you're wondering if you've remembered the handouts or this, that and the other? Anybody ever done this? Okay. Why? Just write yourself a checklist before you go on stage. Okay, we do this all day, every day, and we have a checklist. Airline pilots have a checklist. Shuttle pilots have a checklist. Write your checklist and go through it. That way, when you go up on stage, at least you know that the technology is going to work and you don't have to worry about that. That's one less thing to worry about. And the reason we call it our ties and flies list, because at the top of our list, it goes, is your tie fastened or your flies up? Your ties and flies list is going to look different because you're all going to have different bits and bobs, okay? But that's what we call our ties and flies list. And the last technique, and the simplest technique of all, is to have what I call sentence zero. Sentence zero. The opening sentence of your presentation is probably going to be something along the lines of, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Is that? Yeah? Something along those lines. Okay. The thing is, when you're nervous, the first bit of air that comes out of your lungs is this stuff up at the top. The high pressure air, the scary air, the air that makes it sound like you are terrified. But what I want you to do is invent sentence zero and say sentence zero in your head while you breathe out, so that the very first sentence of your presentation, your real first sentence, when you say that out loud, that is not using the high pressure air at the top of your lungs, that is using the low pressure air towards the bottom of your lungs. Is that making sense? So what you don't do is have this imaginary sentence, whoa, and then breathe in again, because that defeats the whole object. What I want you to do is breathe out, breathe out, breathe out with this pretend sentence, sentence zero, and then start. So my sentence zero is, effectively this morning, was, good Lord, what a very big room. Okay, so I went through my head this morning, good Lord, what a very big room. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Is that making sense? And I did it all in one breath. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, wasn't the first thing I said in my head. It happened to be the first thing I said out loud. Okay? But it wasn't the first thing in my head. A couple of tips about sentence zero. Keep them clean, just in case you ever say them out loud. And make them appropriate to the place where you are in. Because if you are kind of making it up as you go along, that's fantastic. But if you are doing it by routine, that's also fantastic. You get bored. So what I tend to recommend people do is, as they go into the room, they invent it in the room. Before they come on stage, so they're not making it up as they go along, but not hours and hours and hours beforehand, because that makes it a sterile sentence. All right? It wants to be something that's relevant to the room. So I'm standing here thinking, half of you guys can't see me because there are pillars in the way. What a very big room. Okay, that was my first impression as I came into the room. So essentially it's, what a very big room. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? How you define your sentence zero, that's entirely up to you, but I strongly recommend you play around with sentence zero. Okay? So if you've got your sentence zero stuff, if you've got your breathing stuff, if you've got your peripheral vision stuff, if you've got your anchoring stuff, it's not going to stop you being nervous. Nothing should. But it will stop you being as nervous. Okay? And what I've put up on the screen there are ways of getting more help. I can't do everything in half an hour. This takes forever. Okay? Differentpanic.info. I love Different Panic. It's not going to work when I work in the south of England, but you know what I mean up here, okay? Differentpanic.info, and there's some stuff up there. For those of you using Twitter, my name on Twitter is @presentations, and I'm quite happy to chat with everybody. Or if you just Google something called the Telling People blog, there are 4 or 5 years worth of free bits of advice and stuff that you can grab from there. The other way of getting more help is to grab one of these. Okay, so just a Panic Like a Pro postcard. Stick your name, address, phone number, email address, whatever you want on the back of it, and I will give you a call and see if I can give you. It may be that it may be that I have to charge you for it, but it may be that if you just ask me a question here, it may be that I can help for free or just recommend a book or something. Okay, it's not guaranteed that I will charge you for it. What is guaranteed is that I'm doing a full day's training on Friday. So if anybody wants to grab a place on a full day's training in the middle of Newcastle, I've brought the price down from £185 down to just £85. The catch being there are only 2 places left. You need to book it today, and there will be a camera in the room. That's why I've dropped the price. Okay? The camera won't be photographing you, it'll be photographing me, but it will catch the back of your heads. Okay. So, breathing, peripheral vision, anchoring, your ties and flies list, sentence 0. Bring them all together, they take some practice, but I guarantee you they will make you an awful lot less like you feel like you want to die, an awful less likely you want to panic. Okay. Thank you very much indeed, folks. If you want me, grab me. If you want to put your name and address on that stuff, that's fantastic. Take care.